Good evening. Great honor to be here. Just want to make sure this is working so I can walk around, because as college professors don't like to stand still, and members of Congress were oftentimes tethered to a microphone, so I want to see what will happen. And I should say, in the Senate, they have unlimited time to talk, and they always manage to exceed it. In the House, we're limited by time, so I'm hoping, Jim, at some point you wave me off and say, okay, that's about it. It works. It's an honor to be here, Jim. Thank you so much for the invitation. All of you as part of this incredible organization. Thank you for what you do, whether you're supporters of it. I want to particularly congratulate those who've been recognized for these awards tonight. It's pretty amazing. Julie, where are you? Julie, where? Just there you are. Phenomenal. But all of you, as I read the posters out there of your work, we need more people like you, and the federal government needs more organizations like Pioneer to help us identify what are the well-functioning programs and what can we do. Also, special thank you to Governor Baker, who's the lovely First Lady here and the first father of the state, who managed to always entertain us at the table there. Big one, little one. Thank you. Imagine this headline. There's a disease that has hit Cape Cod. It is expected by the end of the year, all 215,000 residents will be dead. The disease will spread to the main part of Massachusetts. And by the end of the year, some 350,000 citizens of the state will die. And then imagine this. The state legislature passed a couple bills, put a couple $1 million towards the program, recessed for the year, and sent out mailers to their constituents telling them, boy, didn't we do a great job. We wouldn't accept that. We would consider that preposterous. But the fact is, mental illness has that kind of an impact upon America. Tom Insel and the Center for Disease Control estimated that about 350,000 people died, primary or secondary to mental illness in this country last year. 350,000. Staggering number. If you just look at those who died from suicide, 41,000. Substance abuse overdose deaths, 45,000. Homicide, 1,200, committed by someone with mental illness. The mentally ill who attacked a police officer, perhaps 300 of them died in the process. Then you also have to look at other numbers here too in this body count. Because the mentally ill tend to die 10 to 25 years sooner than the rest of the population. Why? Because they have other medical problems. Cancer, heart disease, lung disease, infectious disease, HIV, AIDS, the list goes on. And generally not treated. They, in part, are not near treatment. They avoid treatment. They're not aware of their own treatment. In fact, many times, 40% of the population with severe mental illness don't even know they're sick. It's a condition called anosognosia. They're not even aware. You also see it with Alzheimer's, dementia, and types of brain disorders, traumatic brain injury, where a person is not aware they're sick. So when that occurs, so we have 60 million people in the nation with some level of mental illness in any given year. 10 or 11 million with severe mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar, severe depression, schizoaffective disorders. And of those, about 4 million, no treatment at all. Nothing. And what do we know when a person with severe mental illness has no treatment? They get worse. And when they have their breakdown, they have neurological damages occurs. Problems increase. But what have we done in this country to take care of that? Well, let's look back a little bit in history. For years, centuries, we would just imprison them, torture them, burn them at the stake. When we had so many in our prisons in the 1800s, Dorothea Dix, a nurse, traveled to the countryside and says, we need to change this. Let's give them a humane setting. And so they developed a number of these psychiatric hospitals, sanitariums, or asylums where people had a place of some respite. Not a bad idea for the time, given that we didn't have drug companies and we didn't have medications. But we knew for some people, if you provide that kind of comfort, some people would get better. They became, however, the snake pits. They became the cuckoo's nests. They became places infested with this idea where you could dump anybody in there. No rights, no desire to really do much with them. And then in World War II, you had all these providers, at least had some level of training, move out to go into the military. You had less and less qualified people there, more and more people packed into them, and the abuses grew. So much so that a movement emerged later on to close them down. In the 1950s, we had 550,000 psychiatric hospital beds in this country. The population of this country, 150 million. Now, we have about 40,000 psychiatric hospital beds in this country, population 316 million. What happened? Well, you had some movements that went throughout multiple states. Every state that was infested with this. They said, you know, we can save a lot of money if we close these places down, and indeed they did. Shut them down. Let's move to community mental health. After all, John F. Kennedy, the last bill he signed before he died, was one to help make this transition to community health services. But it really didn't get going until the 1980s because you had the one side saying, close them, let's save money. You had another side saying, close them because they hurt people's rights. And so we put people out. But where did they go? Well, some got better because of medications or treatments. Some did get better because they shouldn't have been there in the first place just because you had the right to put someone away. Or at that time, there were no rights. Lock someone up, you didn't like them, off they went. But what happened is, as we closed these hospitals down, we increased our prison populations. We increased our homeless populations. We put more and more people into an emergency room where they were boarded until a bed opened up that they didn't have, where they were given a 5-point tie down on their gurney and left for hours, days, weeks, or months waiting for treatment, waiting to see a psychiatrist, waiting to see somebody. And in many cases, just discharged and sent out. We had people who were sometimes in emergency rooms, you had physicians there who didn't even want them in there. I mean, think of this. Mental illness, the only disease where you call the police to take them away. Can you imagine this? Someone's drowning in the ocean on the beach here. Quick, call the police and arrest them. You know, you have someone with a heart attack. Take them to jail. That's what we do with the mentally ill. Where they get worse, 80% of people who are in jail with a mental illness get no treatment. In fact, many places cut their budgets. They simply don't provide medication. If you are mentally ill versus someone who's not mentally ill and you go to jail for a small crime, that could be public intoxication, it could be urinating on the statue, it could be a small crime of theft in a store. But that person with mental illness tends to serve a sentence 4 times longer than the person without mental illness. Why? They get in fights in jail, they assault a guard, they have a felony assault charge on top of them, it builds. They get put in isolation. The worst thing you could do with someone with mental illness who's in jail. But what we have done now is, in effect, in every county in America, the hospitals are the jails. And most of those people, about half to 60% of people in jail have some level of mental illness, and most get no treatment. So we replaced the hospital bed with the jail and said, look at this, we gave them their rights, when in fact we took them away. We tied them to hospital beds, we gave them their rights. No, we didn't. We simply chained them to a bed or gave them a chemical straitjacket. We gave them their rights and dumped them on the street to be homeless. No, we didn't. We took their rights away. Or we let them go to the county morgue as one of the body count. Again, last year in America, just look at the primary causes of suicide, 41,000 deaths, homicides, and drug overdose deaths. You already have last year in this country 85 to 100,000 deaths, primarily related to mental illness. More deaths in 2015 in the United States of America, more deaths than the total U.S. combat deaths of the entire Korean War and the entire Vietnam War combined. It didn't wake us up. What woke us up? Well, when I became chairman of the Oversight and Investigations Committee in November 2012, soon afterwards, the tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary occurred. America was waking up. What happened here? Well, my colleagues in the Senate said, let's go after guns. And I said, being the only practicing mental health professional in the federal government, said, maybe we should look at what's going on in their heads and not what's in their hands. Because many people die from other means. And plus, there's also a propensity of injury in the mentally ill. 4 to 10 times more likely you will be the victim of violence. Far more likely you will be killed, particularly if you're not on medication, if you're mentally ill. Why are we doing something about this? Well, it came down to this issue is that now we're considering treating this a different way. And this whole shift to consider changes in severe mental illness is the pendulum swinging the other way. And I submit to you that this grand experiment has failed of closing down all these institutions of care and stopping all treatment. It's a principle that operated under, I believe, was a misguided and self-centered and projected belief that people at all times are fully capable of deciding their own fate and direction regardless of their deficits and disease, and that the right to self-decay and self-destruction overrides the right to be healthy. In so doing, as a society, we comfortably abdicated our responsibility to action and live under what I believe is the perverse redefinition that the most compassionate compassion is to do nothing at all. And it further bolstered what I believe was the most evil of prejudices, that the person with disabilities deserves no more than what they are. And under that approach, no dreams, no aspirations, no goals to do better can even exist. In fact, indeed, to help a person heal who has mental illness was a head-on collision with the bigoted belief that the severely mentally ill have no right to be better than they are. And we have no obligation to help. This is the corrupt evil of what we developed in this country, of the hands-off approach, of the anti-treatment model that existed. And that perversion of thought is embedded in the belief and the glorification that to live this life of deterioration and paranoia and filth and squalor and homelessness and emotional torment somehow trump a healed brain and the true chance to lead a better life. This was the movement that came through in this country as the right to be sick, that I believe is culpable in allowing this mass death of hundreds of thousands of people to die with their rights on each year. And that hatred could be embedded in lots of other things, perhaps anger and resentment or whatever else it is, but it certainly is not embedded in a model of treatment getting better. Throughout all this, however, there's been many good providers out there, doctors and nurses and social workers and a whole list of people who said, we've got to keep trying to do something. It is amazing when you go into some community mental health centers and compare them to what hospitals do in other areas. You go to a cancer treatment center, magnificent building, usually right out front, brand new. It's beautiful, on all the advertisements, on all the billboards. Where's the community mental health center? Usually down some back alley. Right? They still have avocado green furniture from the 1970s because each year all they can do is buy one more piece of furniture with what's left over for their budget. We shove it to the side because we abdicate our responsibility and don't understand. You know, if you look at such things as chronic illness, you are going to have double the rate of depression if you are diagnosed with having heart disease or lung disease or something. And if it's untreated depression, you double your costs. And those actually may be much, much higher. But at least we know, at the very least, it's that much. But how many cancer treatment centers and heart treatment centers, et cetera, have right there on board, some of them are starting to do this now, psychiatry, psychology, social work, who say, we're going to help you from the onset deal with emotional torment. But flip that around. What about the person with psychosis who is going to have many of these problems? Well, we ignore that because we put them in jail and we forget about it. But the fact is, you know, it costs, according to a study done in Arkansas for their legislature, 20 times more to deal with the mentally ill in jail than it does in an outpatient clinic. 20 times more. You see states building new prisons saying, what are we going to do with all these people? It is not just the idea of mandatory sentencing laws. It's that is the dumping grounds for the mentally ill. And they get worse each time. They get worse. Now, when I say the federal government is culpable in this, let me explain to you a couple things about that. There's some key federal policies that are part of this. You know, if you're a minority and you're poor in America, you are out of luck because the conditions are stacked against you. Let me give you a couple examples. We have federal policies in place that say you can't see two doctors in the same day if you're on Medicaid. Now think about this. You're brought to see the family physician. Let's say you're 19 years old. As a parent, you bring someone there. Maybe it's your brother, sister, son, daughter. And you say, I got to tell you about my son. He's, you know, ever since school ended, he's kind of isolated. He's not with friends anymore. He's painted the windows of his room black. He's just obsessed with video and being on the internet all the time. He won't even talk to me anymore. He sends me emails. He eats very little. He's lost weight. He's isolated. I don't know what's going on with him. Now, at that point, the physician should say, you know what, we need a psychiatric consult immediately. And they say, oh, you're on Medicaid. Can you come back tomorrow? Now, think about this. Someone who is already struggling with transportation, with organization in their life, we make it more difficult for those who have the most difficulty. Oh, it gets worse. About beds. We had 550,000 beds in the 1950s. Remember I said that? 40,000 now. Part of this is the federal government. Medicaid rules that say if you're low income and you're between ages 22 and 64, you can't go to a hospital that has more than 16 beds. I can't make that up. So what happens? They may go to an emergency room. They may be kicked out. They may, whatever that is. They may have to wait. Remember the case of Senator Creed Deeds in Virginia? Brought his son to a hospital in Virginia and couldn't get him a bed. Took him home. The son tried to kill the father, and the son killed himself. So that's the second problem. We have another problem with the federal government, that's HIPAA laws. The Health Insurance Portability Act was supposed to be there that when you transferred employers, your records were kept confidential. Okay, I like that. But they morphed into this program where no one can know anything about anybody at any time. And think about this. In this audience here, many of you have dealt with mental illness on your own life. Many of you have a son or a daughter or a spouse or brother or sister who's dealt with it. Many of you have been to emergency rooms or perhaps jail or courts fighting for services for someone. And probably when you asked to get information, they told you, we can't tell you anything. We've heard case after case of a family member going to a court and pleading with the judge, please tell me, where is my daughter? Where is my mother? What can I do to help her? And next to her, the parent is a caseworker saying, I can't tell you anything. I can't even acknowledge if I know them. And the family member says, I don't think you know them because you're the 5th caseworker this year. You don't know them. I love them. I care for them. No, not according to current law. Love means nothing here. Because what we're going to do is give you absolutely no information unless that person gives permission. However, when you're dealing with someone who has anosognosia and severe mental illness and believes the voices in their head, they're not going to give permission. So if I have a case of someone with severe leg pain and believe that's because the radio signals his father sends him through the earth are blocked by his knees, then he's not getting help for what is diabetes. And if he doesn't get that help, he's going to need his legs amputated. But the doctors won't tell the father because the son says, don't tell my dad because he's part of the CIA, and he has it. And so he's withering away in this slow motion death spiral that we sentence people to in this country. Another issue. In the 1990s, there was a split between this federal agency called SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and the National Institute of Mental Health. Bad divorce. SAMHSA became the applied area, and IMH more the research issues, hard-nosed research. But SAMHSA drifted off into the area of behavioral wellness and not the area of mental illness treatment. In fact, in their 40,000-word statement of purpose, they do not even mention the word schizophrenia or bipolar. They fund workshops to tell people how to get off their medication. They fund workshops on collages, interpretive dancing. They fund workshops on themselves, dancing and singing songs and giving them mental health awareness. They have a website. They had a website. They took it down after we inquired. I think it cost about $400,000. Animated characters doing sing-along songs for kids. We said, what's that for? Prevention. What are you preventing? We believe prevention is important. So do we. What are you preventing? Well, we think prevention early on is important. Great. What are you preventing and does it work? They can never give us an answer. How much does this cost? We don't know. You know how much it costs. How much does it cost? We don't know. I'm the chairman of the committee. I swore this witness in. Get back to us and tell us how much it costs and what do you do? They never got back to us because they hid that information from us. They spent $24,000 on a painting of 2 people sitting by a rock and other people sitting around. And by the way, those of you who are from Boston, New England, I want you to know that during the winter of 2013, 2014, is that when you had the big snow here? Last year. They actually had a website to help you. It's for people with anxiety about snow. And they had a special crisis line you could call if snow upset you. Now, around that time, I had someone in my office who was from Boston. He says, it's Boston, it snows. But these do-gooders in this office decided you needed help. Now, in the meantime, they didn't do anything for your homeless. They didn't do anything for the people with schizophrenia. They didn't do anything to deal with the homicide rate or the suicide rate. But by golly, they were there to help you with snow anxiety. So, yeah, these things are humorous to think about, but tragically so, aren't they? Because these things cost lives. Well, we continued on this investigation for a couple years, and I traveled through multiple states throughout the nation. The stories were the same. And everywhere we went, there's some family member who would come up to me and say, I got to tell you the story, my story. One of the gentlemen from California, Hernandez was his name. He came in just a few days, the stitches had been removed from his face. His son stabbed him repeatedly, stabbing him in the temple, saying, it's okay, Dad, just die. He fought him back. The police arrived, took his son away. Father's saved, but now his son is in jail forever. Recently met a woman, Costello was her name. Her husband was the labor commissioner for the state of Oklahoma. Their son with schizophrenia. Struggled to get him help. They couldn't get HIPAA information, didn't know what was going on. He had other illnesses and diseases, sepsis and other things. He wasn't getting treated. They didn't know what to do. One day after dinner, walking in the parking lot, son took a knife, stabbed the husband 17 times, slit his throat, dying in his wife's arms. And she came to me and said, you know, if we were able to do things like sharing information with HIPAA, if I could get him help, if I could force him in treatment, my husband would be alive. But now I've lost my husband and my son who is in jail and won't come out. This is what we do in this country. This is third world. This is wrong. This is immoral. And it had to change. So I introduced a bill called the Helping Families in Mental Health Crisis Act. It got nowhere in 2013 because we got a lot of blowback. You can't take people's rights away. I said, it's the right to be sick. I want to emphasize the right to be well. You can't provide treatment for what's called assisted outpatient treatment, which Massachusetts is one of 4 states that doesn't have it yet, because in this state you still believe it's better for that person to be sick and live in squalor than make them get treatment. And by the way, wherever you are on the gun issue, know this, that if a person is involuntarily committed, they can't buy a gun. But if you say we don't believe in involuntary commitment, they can. Hint, do something about that. So we saw so many things going on here, we introduced a bill with several things. 1, we got rid of the same-day doctor rule. 2, we got rid of the 16-bed limit. 3, we fund programs like assisted outpatient treatment for the person with a history of violence. It's under due process. The judge determines you're not bad enough to go into a hospital, but I want you to stay in treatment. We're going to check up on you every week, and it's mandatory. You got to do that. We fund programs for telehealth, telemental health. Half the counties in America have no psychiatrists or psychologists. Half of it. We help provide that based upon a Massachusetts model. We also know there are so few psychiatrists, psychologists in the country, we provide funding to help with internships and fellowships, particularly with minorities. We have a huge shortage of minorities. I think 2 or 3% of psychiatrists in this country are African American, and maybe 3 or 4% are Latino. And that's just wrong. We need more. Almost none are Native American. We need more in every area. One of the things about this is with severe mental illness, half the cases emerge by age 14, 75% by age 24. But we only have 9,000 child and adolescent psychiatrists in this country. We need 30,000. So again, a lot of times medication and treatment is provided by people who don't have the training. 98%, this is according to Inspector General's report for HHS, 98% of psychotropic drugs prescribed for a pediatric population, 98% of drugs prescribed for pediatric population, psychotropic drugs, are prescribed off-label. Off-label. That's for something the FDA has not approved. We've seen things about 4-year-olds having all these antipsychotics and other things going on, all these problems they have. Well, we need more child and adolescent psychiatrists. We know that we have to be doing a lot here with dealing with violence, but the way to deal with this is treatment before the tragedy. And I was excited that this last Wednesday, with a vote of 53-0, despite years of fighting this, the Energy and Commerce Committee passed this out unanimously to move towards the floor of the House. Now that's... In that, I had said to the committee that when that day we were taking a stand and affirming that mental illness is not a crime, not a moral deficit, not a choice, not a joke. It is an illness. And we have to affirm that we have to do something about this in a way that no committee has ever tackled this in the history of Congress. We began that quest a couple years ago in dealing with Sandy Hook and Tucson and Aurora, Colorado. But I had made that promise to families, to hundreds of thousands of the homeless, the imprisoned, the families who are struggling with untreated mental illness, that we're going to do something about it. And we recognize that Congress is not going to stand by idly anymore. We have to say no more of those moments of silence on the House floor when then we walk away. We have to let people know that we're going to break the stigma of mental illness Not through slogans, but through real evidence-based treatment, where people know that if they get care, they can get better. By having this new office, the Assistant Secretary of Mental Health and Substance Use, who will coordinate 112 federal programs that spend billions of dollars, that have, this, according to 2 GAO reports, have no accountability and fund a lot of silly programs. But we know this, you cannot treat mental illness with denial, and you can't treat mental illness by sentencing people to prison or abandoning them to homelessness or strapped to an emergency room gurney for days. But just because we passed it out of committee with a 53-0 vote, what does this mean next? It's got to go before the House. I hope wherever your congressman is, you tell them to vote for it. And then it's got to go before the Senate, and who knows? I don't want this to be like Hemingway's Old Man of the Sea, where the fish that finally comes ashore. It doesn't look anything like what we need to do. But today, you'll recognize it's some great people doing some great things. But I need you to take the courage to do something yourself. You know, your congressman never reads that letter you don't write. They never answer that call you don't place. I'm asking for a few minutes of courage. And as an inspiration, let me tell you about someone with courage that I know. You heard that I'm a Navy doctor. I'm a commander. I work at Walter Reed Hospital in a unit for TBI and PTSD, traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress. A lot of problematic cases come to you. And sadly, some of them are ones where a spouse or a boyfriend or girlfriend walks away. So I didn't expect this. When you're dealing with some pretty devastating diseases. And so it's concerning to us. What happens? I want to tell you about one case. I'll change the details so I don't violate HIPAA laws. But the soldier, one of many who came back with a pretty significant blast and had a lot of damage to his left hemisphere. I had to sit down with his wife and walk through this and see where she was with understanding and dealing with what was there, what his problems were. Now imagine the scene. We're in this conference room. She's sitting across the table from me. And she knows what I'm about to tell her, but I said, so I want to tell you, his frontal lobe is damaged, his personality has changed. He's changing, he's getting better. I don't know how soon or how much, but you'll see a lot of that personality come back. His temporal lobe is damaged in his Broca's area, so he's speaking like someone with a severe stroke. He's getting back to pronouncing words. You can understand him now. He'll get better. I don't know how soon or how much, but he's getting better. His Wernicke's area was damaged too, so his comprehension of speech is way off. His understanding of similes and metaphors isn't there. He's getting better with comprehension. I don't know how soon or how much, but there'll be some improvement. And because it also damaged across his parietal lobe, he was hemiplegic. His right hand was such, he'll never button a button or zip a zipper right with his right hand, but he can take over with his left, and he can just learn to walk again. He won't sprint, but he'll be there as he'll get better. I don't know how soon or how much, but he'll get better. Now imagine that she knew all this stuff, but she's sitting there with tears streaming down her face, and she said, I envy those wives whose husbands don't come home, because they can start their life over. She added to that, I sent this handsome young soldier to war, and I don't know who this man is that came back with his name. Now at that point, I'm fearing the worst. What will happen? What will she do? And I asked her that, what will you do? She straightened up her own shoulders at that point, looked straight at me, and said, if it takes me 50 years, I will teach him to laugh and to love again. That is incredible commitment. That is incredible courage. When the soldier runs towards the sounds of gunfire, they don't want to get hit. They don't join thinking, I'm going to be in an attack. They're hoping not to. But every day that she gets up, she's facing a battle. She doesn't know if he's going to have a seizure in the middle of the night, he's going to choke or die. Every day, she stood by him. She's done that. That's probably the closest thing to a hero I will ever really meet, despite having seen so many from the battlefields. My point is this. If she can do that, what can't you do? If she can do that as an individual, what can't we do as a group of people? You have a state here where you have a governor and cabinet taking hold of trying to change the way the state has approached mental illness, to call it an illness, not as a pariah, not as a joke, not as something to be ignored, but to do something about it. Back up the government, back up the legislature, demand they do more, and please speak up to Congress too. We have a chance to do something here that Congress really can't do otherwise, and that is to save lives. Think about this. All those body count, all those lives, we have a chance to do something. But I'm telling you, if you are silent, you keep this going the same way. Please speak up with a loud voice. Please stand up for these people that have no voice of their own. Let's change the direction of mental health. Let's follow the lead of these groups, these organizations, these individuals who are being honored today. They know what courage is about. They've taken a stand. Please join the cause. God bless you.